Mark Coleman. Mark Coleman is the first ever inaugural UFC heavyweight champion. He won the belt in 1997, where he defeated Dan Severn at UFC 12. Mark the Hammer Coleman was known for his ground and pound style, utilizing his background in wrestling. He was also in the news a couple years back for saving his family from a house fire, which is extremely honorable. Maurice Smith. Maurice Smith, one of the lesser spoken about heavyweight champions in the UFC. Winning the belt in 1997, Maurice Smith defeated Mark Coleman at UFC 14. He also successfully defended his title once against Tank Abbott. Maurice Smith was known for his stand-up style and fast hands. Randy Couture. Randy Couture became the third ever heavyweight UFC champion, defeating Maurice Smith at UFC Ultimate Japan. Couture would subsequently vacate the heavyweight title due to contract disputes with the UFC. Bas Rutten. Bas Rutten defeated Kevin Randleman in 1999 to become the fourth ever UFC heavyweight champion at UFC 20. Previously being a pancrase fighter, Rutten was known for his nifty style and precise striking. Rutten did not defend his belt either and instead chose to vacate to move down to a lower weight class. Kevin Randleman. Kevin Randleman became the fifth ever UFC heavyweight champion, defeating Pete Williams at UFC 23. He won the vacant title and successfully defended it once against Pedro Hizo. Kevin Randleman was known for his marauder style and explosive wrestling. However, he struggled to put together win streaks towards the end of his career. Randy Couture. Randy Couture regained the UFC heavyweight title in the year 2000 at UFC 28, where he defeated Kevin Randleman. Randy Couture went on to defend the belt twice against Pedro Hizo, being extremely undersized for the weight class. These wins were huge for the UFC at the time, as he was one of the first fighters to get pushed into mainstream media. Josh Barnett. Josh Barnett defeated Randy Couture at UFC 36 in 2002. This was one of the shortest reigns in the heavyweight division, as Barnett would subsequently lose the belt after testing positive for steroids. Barnett would never regain the title. Rico Rodriguez. Rico Rodriguez became the UFC heavyweight champion by defeating Randy Couture at UFC 39 in 2002. Before his time in the UFC, he also had a stint in Pride. There was much promise for Rico's future at heavyweight, although he never seemed to be able to defend the belt. Tim Sylvia. Tim Sylvia stopped Rico Rodriguez and finished him at UFC 41 in 2003. Sylvia successfully managed to defend his title once against Gan McGee. This victory was short-lived, however, as he soon had to relinquish his belt for also testing positive for steroids. Frank Mir. Frank Mir, the jiu-jitsu specialist, defeated Tim Sylvia at UFC 48 in 2004. This was a difficult time for the UFC and the heavyweight division, as the UFC was really struggling to bring in viewership under Tim Sylvia as champion. After Mir gained the title, he sadly got injured in a motorbike accident and was forced to vacate his belt so that he could rehabilitate his injuries. Andrei Arlovski. Andrei Arlovski defeated Tim Sylvia in the first round at UFC 51 in 2005 to claim the interim title. This was later upgraded to the undisputed title without having to fight again. Arlovski was feared for his time. Known for his power and ruthless style, he defended the title twice against Justin Eilers and Paul Buetanello. Tim Sylvia. Tim Sylvia is the only second man to regain the heavyweight championship when he knocked out Andrei Arlovski at UFC 59 in 2006. This was a shock to the entire MMA fan base. Sylvia defends his belt twice, against Andrei Arlovski in a trilogy fight and Jeff Monson. Randy Couture. Randy Couture in 2007 became the first man to win the heavyweight title 3 times when he decisioned Sylvia over 5 rounds at UFC 68. Extremely undersized for the weight class, Couture successfully went on to defend the title against Gabriel Gonzaga. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira defeated Tim Sylvia in the 3rd round to win the interim heavyweight championship at UFC 81. Known for his stints in Pride and his jiu-jitsu background, Nogueira was one of the first heavyweights to truly show what it's like to be a black belt. Frank Mir. Frank Mir was the 3rd ever heavyweight to regain the title a 2nd time, defeating Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira via TKO in the 2nd round at UFC 92. 152 in 2008. Although this was only the interim title, this was big for the UFC, as this set up a fight with Brock Lesnar, the ex-WWE superstar. Brock Lesnar defeated Randy Couture via TKO in the second round at UFC 91 in 2008. He went on to unify the belt by defeating Frank Mir in the second round via TKO at UFC 100. Lesnar went on a hiatus due to illness, but returned in July of 2010 to defeat Shane Carwin in the second round via submission at UFC 116. Cain Velasquez defeated Brock Lesnar via TKO in the first round at UFC 121 to win the UFC heavyweight title in 2010. Junior Dos Santos defeated Cain Velasquez via KO in the first round at UFC on Fox 1. After defeating Cain to become the heavyweight champion, he successfully defended the belt against Frank Mir. Cain Velasquez would defeat Junior Dos Santos in the rematch after a 5-round unanimous decision at UFC 151 in 2012. Cain successfully went on to defend the title multiple times against Antonio Silva and Junior Dos Santos. Cain was forced out of a bout at UFC 180 against Fabricio Werdum due to an injury. He did not vacate the belt during this time period, and instead Werdum and Mark Hunt were selected to fight for the interim belt. Fabricio Werdum defeated Mark Hunt at UFC 180 to become the interim heavyweight champion. Werdum would unify the belt at UFC 188 by submitting Cain Velasquez. Werdum was considered an underdog for this fight, and many had Cain winning in any shape or form. Fabricio never successfully defended his belt. Stipe Miocic knocked out Fabricio Werdum in the first round at UFC 198 in 2016. The Croatian native was known for mixing up his collegiate wrestling background with a heavy boxing style. Stipe had a successful run defending his title against Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos and Francis Ngannou. Daniel Cormier, the ex-Olympic wrestler, defeated Stipe Miocic via first round knockout at UFC 226 in 2018. This fight made Daniel not a 1 but 2-time world champion, being the first ever fighter to have both the light heavyweight and heavyweight belt at the same time. Cormier would go on to successfully defend the belt against Derek Lewis. Stipe Miocic commenced his second reign as heavyweight champion, defeating DC via TKO to regain the UFC heavyweight title at UFC 241 in 2019. Stipe successfully went on to defend the title during the peak of COVID in a trilogy fight against Daniel Cormier. Francis Ngannou knocked out Stipe Miocic in round 2 at UFC 260 in 2021. Ngannou was a feared fighter, knocking out all of his past opponents in devastating fashion. He had failed to beat Stipe's wrestling game in the first fight, so many were wondering if he would be able to stifle it the second time around. Due to contract disputes and other issues with the UFC, Francis Ngannou never defended the heavyweight title and left the UFC to venture into boxing. Jon Jones submitted Cyril Gane at UFC 285 in 2023. Jones was a heavy favourite coming into this fight, previously being one of, if not the best light heavyweight champion the UFC had ever seen. This victory was short-lived, however, after Jon Jones majorly damaged his reputation at heavyweight by refusing to fight any of the contenders. Tom Aspinall became the interim heavyweight champion at UFC 295, defeating Sergey Pavlovich via round 1 knockout. After defending his interim belt, much hype revolved around him and Jon Jones unifying the title. The fight would never happen, and Jon Jones would end up vacating the belt, leaving Tom Aspinall to be UFC heavyweight champion, which is where we are now in 2025. So yeah, tried something different today. I hope you kind of like the storyline-esque video. Make sure to leave a sub because we're really trying to hit that 1,000 subscribers. It would really mean a lot, mate. If you guys like MMA YouTube, please drop a sub. I'll catch you guys next time. Goodbye.